A lot of us read fantasy growing up, whether it was Harry Potter, Aragon, or whatever your school library had. For me, my gateway fantasy was Deltora Quest. But then life happens, we get older, we get busier, and a lot of people seem to think that fantasy is something that you outgrow. I'm here to tell you that's completely wrong. Fantasy isn't just dragons and magic. Though both of those are awesome, sometimes you can understand the real world better through imaginary ones. Now, I've read fantasy that deal with parenthood and generational trauma and loss and how to cope with loss. There's a lot of fantasy that handle heavy topics and help you actually learn and grow as a person yourself from reading them. But if you're new to the genre, it can be very overwhelming, and that's why I hope this video is gonna help you. Unfortunately, I can't read everything, but I do believe I've read enough to confidently curate a top 10 list for beginner fantasy books for adults. Now, if you're interested in urban fantasy, then you're gonna want to hear from today's sponsor, Podium Audio, and they're the folks behind the audiobook editions for the Convergence series by Craig Allenson. Now, if that name sounds familiar, then you might have heard of his epic sci-fi saga called Expeditionary Force. Yeah, it's the same author. Now, the Convergence series, this is an urban fantasy that is filled with action and adventure and magic and Craig's signature humor, which is like my favorite part. The story follows Casimir, or Kaz Wolf, and basically he's on the run because the law believes that he killed his aunt. But he's also running away from the person that actually killed his aunt and intends on finishing the job. Now, Kaz also happens to be the world's only wizard as far as he knows, and he's not the kind of wizard that wields a staff or a wand. He wields a Glock, and he drives around in his beat-up RV with his talking dog. Yeah, he has a talking dog. And this dog happens to be possessed by a 3,000-year-old Babylonian wizard. But it's still a dog, and it believes that squirrels are its mortal enemy. I love Duke the dog so much. He's like the best part of the books, in my opinion. I've been listening to the audiobooks for the Convergence series, and I've just been having a blast. They're really fast-paced and filled with action, and the humor as well is just so spot on. If you like self-aware humor and gritty magic systems and a reluctant hero, I think this is the perfect series for you. And the narration done by R.C. Bray is fantastic. I really feel connected to these characters because his narration is just so good. I love the narration for Duke. If this sounds like your kind of chaos, you're in luck because books 1 through 5 are available on Audible right now, and book 5, Desperate Measures, just released on August 5th. So make sure to give them a listen yourself. You can check the link in the description, and thanks again to Podium for sponsoring the video. And now let's get into the list. Now in this video, I'm not going to recommend very mainstream series like Lord of the Rings or A Song of Ice and Fire, even if they're both amazing. Everyone knows about those. I'm also not going to recommend extremely complicated series like Malazan Book of the Fallen. Even if it is awesome, it's not exactly beginner friendly. Okay, moving on to number 10. Now, the first recommendation is a series I've just been getting into and having so much fun with, and that is Rivers of London by Ben Aronovich. This is set in a modern setting in London. It has a gritty police detective plotline, it has relatable characters, and some really fun humor. This series has been a blast to read, and I think this can feel a lot more accessible to non-fantasy readers because it's set in a modern-day setting. It's got very relatable characters. It's much more accessible than some epic fantasy saga. Now, the story follows police officer Peter Grant, who stumbles onto magic after encountering a ghost. And before long, he's apprenticed to the last English wizard, Detective Nightingale. He navigates cases involving the gods of the Thames, spectral disturbances, and murders that only a wizard cop could untangle. Now, Ben Aronovich actually started his career with writing for Doctor Who, and here in this series, you can tell that same British slang and humor has carried through. And it's also very clear that this was written by someone someone who actually knows the streets of London. I love that London itself is pretty much a character in this book. Aronovich paints it as magical and gritty and steeped in folklore. And even though we're dealing with some gritty cases, the tone overall is actually pretty light and witty. Peter Grant handles these supernatural cases with like deadpan humor and scientific skepticism and a lot of dumb luck. I think if you're a fan of the Dresden Files, you 100% need to read Rivers of London. So yeah, it's accessible, it's engaging, it's much different than classic like medieval inspired fantasy. These are quick, breezy books. They're very engaging and character forward, I would say. So overall, I think they work as a great palate cleanser in between other big high fantasy books you're reading. And I've heard a lot of good things about the audiobooks as well. I'm gonna have to listen to those. Now, I was going to put The Gentleman Bastards on this list because it's such a good series, but it's unfinished. So I didn't want to put it on the list this time. Instead, I'm going for a very close second, The Silverblood Promise by James Logan. I mean, and I don't mean second as an insult. This is a fantastic book on its own right. It's very different than the Gentleman Bastards, but it does have some of those same elements that if you enjoy one, you're going to enjoy this one as well. This is one of those books that just hit so many sweet spots for me, and I kind of just picked it up on a whim, and I ended up devouring it. It has a fast-paced heist, it has witty characters, and it's very character-driven, and it's gritty, but just gritty enough without falling into full-on nihilistic grimdark. It still has its lighter moments, and I enjoyed this one so much, and I gotta say that James Logan, this was his debut novel, but it feels like he's been writing for a long time. Like, I was surprised this was his debut novel. So definitely, if you're a fan of The Lies of Locke Lamora, or Mistborn, or Foundryside, I think this is a great series you should read. And not a lot of people talk about this on YouTube, at least from what I've seen. So this is my call to you to pick this one up. I have a link in the description. You should give it a read. And like I said, it's got all the hallmarks that I really love. It has a roguish main character that has a shady past. It has a bustling city with crime merchants and syndicates and masked killers. And it has this growing mystery that's going to keep you hooked until the final page. It also has some like ancient ruins and civilizations and stuff. So much to enjoy with this book. And I gotta say, the very best part of this book for me was the duo, the unlikely duo that we follow here, Lucan and Flea. Basically, we're following this gruff has-been noble and a street-smart, sharp-tongued street urchin, and their relationship, the banter is hilarious, and their relationship actually is very heartwarming. I would honestly read like 3 more books of just them like arguing as they run from danger, because they're such an entertaining duo. I can't wait to read the second book, The Blackfire Blade. I was sent an early copy, but I believe it comes out November 2025. So very soon you can get your hands on The Blackfire Blade. And I gotta say, I really love these covers together. And then we have Michael J. Sullivan's The Riyria Revelations trilogy, consisting of Theft of Swords, Rise of Empire, and The Heir of Novron. These books need to be talked about more often. They're so much fun. Here we follow Royce, a thief, and Hadrian, a mercenary, who become embroiled in royal conspiracy, ancient mysteries, and sweeping political intrigue. You can expect clever heists, a lot of witty banter, and uncovering deeper threats to a struggling kingdom. Sullivan masters classic fantasy tropes with a fresh voice. I mean, we got dwarves and elves, but it's all written in this modern, snappy way, and it's really charming. These books are very well crafted. They're so entertaining. Like, I love the dialogue in these books, especially between Royce and Hadrian. They're one of my favorite duos in fantasy period. They're obviously, you kind of root for them from the beginning, but then over the course of the books, you really begin to care for these two characters. It's very rewarding to read, but it's also not overly complicated either. I feel like this is very easy for beginners. Overall, so much fun reading this series. I highly recommend it, especially if you just really enjoy some great character work, some witty banter, some great action and fast-paced storytelling. So much fun. Also, there's some audiobooks that are great as well, and there's some graphic audiobooks where it has like a full cast of characters. It's got sound effects and music and whatnot. Those are really great as well. And Michael J. Sullivan has written some prequels and some sequels that you can dive into right after reading Riyria Revelations. And another urban fantasy, we have Jade City by Fonda Lee. This is book 1 in the Greenbone Saga, and this is set in an Asian-inspired metropolis. This is like a modern crime saga wrapped in a fantasy skin. You've got powerful families, political scheming, brutal street fights, and a substance, Jade, that grants enhanced abilities to those trained to use it. We have martial arts mixed with magic, but it doesn't have those like extreme tropes that you see in a lot of martial arts stories. This is urban fantasy at its sharpest. And the real magic here isn't just the Jade, it's the characters. And watching this family unravel and fight to hold on to power is so compelling. No one is purely good or evil. You root for them even when they make awful decisions, because Lee makes you understand exactly why they're making them. If you love character-driven fantasy with themes of family, honor, betrayal, power, and also just a really unique magic system that's very well thought out and a very immersive urban fantasy setting, then you need to read Jade City. This is intense. It's very much like a cinematic fantasy. Like, you don't want to put this book down. So definitely check out the Greenbone Saga. And next we have The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. Now, I recommend this series to anybody that loves fantasy, but especially for beginners. I feel like this is the perfect blend of like classic fantasy elements, but told in a modern way. It's got good versus evil, it has ancient prophecies, sword training, montages, animal companions, and it's all set in a setting that's inspired by medieval Europe. It's all in there, but it's told in this like sharp and modern way that just makes it so enjoyable to read. Also, there is some epic grand battles in this series. Not to mention very memorable and likable characters as well. The first book in the quartet, Malice, feels like stepping into what I loved about fantasy growing up. It's packed with everything you would expect from high fantasy. We have giants, we have worms or dragons, we have talking crows and ancient gods. But the thing that makes this so much more like intense, I feel like, is actually the familiar elements, the family elements, the relationships in this series. It makes everything feel urgent and emotionally raw and also deeply human. Like, I cared so much about the characters in these books, and that's something that I feel like a lot of classic fantasy kind of lacks, is their realistic and relatable characters that actually feel human. This series does that so well. And the line between heroes and villains does kind of blur, but I would not call this grimdark. It does not go into full nihilism or anything like that. There's actually a lot of really great emotional moments in this series, despite the very gritty tone. And man, it is the kind of story where not everybody is safe, but all of them matter. And yeah, you might shed some tears while reading. Gwyn delivers plot twists and brutal duels and moments of just emotional devastation. But then somehow he still has these really great light moments of like found family and just a lot of moments that bring warmth as well. And that's what I love so much about The Faithful and the Fallen. The writing is very accessible. The battles are intense and cinematic, and really John Gwynne writes battle scenes like no other author. I feel like he's like top tier when it comes to writing battle scenes. And like I said, these are characters that are going to stick with you. And the best part is that this is a complete series. So if you're looking for a binge-worthy series that kind of gets bigger and better with each book, then this is the perfect series to dive into. And if you really enjoy it, then there's also his Of Blood and Bone series and the Bloodsworn Saga that you can read right after. Oh yeah, also shout out to John Gwyn's sons, Ed and Will. They actually have a booktube channel called The Brothers Gwyn. I recommend checking out their channel. I'll put a link in the description actually. Now, I think a lot of adults getting into fantasy books are likely gamers as well, and if you're looking for a combination of the two, then lit RPG is actually such a cool genre. There's just a huge range of quality within lit RPG. I've been diving into the genre. I found some really great gems. I've also had to DNF quite a few stories that just weren't really the quality I was looking for. But I want to save you the time and just recommend like the best lit RPG that I've read so far. And if you're familiar with lit RPG, I'm sure you already know where I'm going with this. Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman is the best lit RPG I have read so far. Even if you're not a gamer, even if you're not interested in lit RPG, I still recommend checking out Dungeon Crawler Carl and giving it a read. Actually, I highly recommend the audiobooks, even over reading, to be honest, because the audiobooks for Dungeon Crawler Carl are the best audiobooks I've listened to. They are top tier. Jeff Hayes is a narrator you're going to appreciate every time a new character comes on the scene because he does a new voice for every character. And I actually thought there was like a multiple cast for the audiobooks, but no, it's just one guy and he is so good at doing all the voices. Very, very talented narrator, and that's why I recommend listening to the audiobooks over just reading, because I feel like the audiobooks even enhanced the story for me. And that's nothing against Matt Dinniman's writing, obviously. You can still just read the books and have a great time. I'm just trying to highlight how good the narrator is. In fact, I think the audiobooks are so good that even people who don't typically enjoy audiobooks are still going to have a blast listening to Dungeon Crawler Carl. Now, to briefly set the stage, this is a series about an average Joe who finds himself thrust into a globe-sized deathmatch, watched by an entire galaxy of aliens cheering on their favorite killer human slaves. And Carl's actually one of the lucky ones because 95% of the world got wiped out in an instant when aliens invaded and terraformed the Earth into a giant multi-layered dungeon. It's a very messed up situation, and Dinniman dives into how dark it really is, but this is also a very ridiculous series in the best way possible. It's one of the funniest series I've read. There's a cat that can shoot lasers from her eyes, the AI running the whole game has a foot fetish, Carl doesn't have pants, but the AI makes sure that he acquires a toe ring. It's a series that's gonna make you laugh, while also appreciating how the authors managed to create a multi-layered story with heart and moments that emotionally gut punch you. Honestly, Dungeon Crawler Carl is some of the most fun I've had with reading, or listening, I guess, and that's why it gets a high recommendation. Now, I also want to highlight Mark Lawrence. Mark Lawrence is an author that is very consistent, I feel like. You really can't go wrong, whether it's The Broken Empire, Red Sister, or Book of the Ancestor. You can't really go wrong with Mark Lawrence. It all comes down to your personal tastes, though. With Broken Empire, you're following like a despicable social path, kind of like in Clockwork Orange. In Red Sister, we got teenage magical ninja nuns. And then The Red Queen's War follows a coward and fool, almost the polar opposite of the protagonist from Broken Empire. There's so much to enjoy with all those series, but the series I actually want to highlight is Mark Lawrence's newest series, the Library Trilogy, starting with The Book That Wouldn't Burn, The Book That Broke the World, then we have The Book That Held Her Heart. This is a recent release, and man, this is such a unique series. Oh, there's also There's also Missing Pages, which is like a collection of short story novellas. Yeah, it's a collection of 4 short stories. I haven't actually read this one yet, but I am gonna get to it very soon. But this series, man, there's really nothing quite like it that I've read. And the reason I wanted to recommend this one for beginners wanting to fall in love with fantasy is because this series is basically a gigantic love letter to reading in general. And I know that some of you watching this video are going to love these books, so you need to give them a read. It's also just a series that's very, like, I just felt invested the entire time in these characters' journeys. I just felt like Mark Lawrence is on a whole new level with the Library trilogy, and I really think you guys need to read these ones. And this is a series with some serious substance to it. It has emotional depth. There's some really unique world building. This is one of those series that's going to break your brain, shatter it to pieces, rebuild it before shattering it yet again. It's very thought-provoking. It even has a bit of romance in there as well, and I love the characters, I love the plot, I love the world. This is one that really, like, made my eyes start to water in several cases. There's some big emotional gut punches in this series. These books really push the boundaries of fantasy and sci-fi, and I think if you're a fan of great literature, you need to give them a read. They do have some Easter eggs and references to some of Lawrence's other works, and that's really fun to pick up on. Those Easter eggs aren't necessary. You can still start with this series and have a great time. So I'll have links in the description if you want to check it out. And then we have David Gemmell's Drenai Saga. Now, most of his books are 350 to 450 pages, so I'd say they're fairly short and they're very entertaining. The Drenai Saga has 11 books in total, which includes a few trilogies and several standalone stories, but all 11 are set in the same world. Now, legend is the best place to start, and speaking of legend, the protagonist, Druss, is an absolute legend. Sometimes called Captain of the Axe. In Ventria, they call him Druss the Sender. In Vagria, he's merely the Axeman. In Lentria, he's the Silver Slayer. And to the Nadir, he is Deathwalker. For wherever he walks, death follows. If you want to follow a badass character with a lot of depth, then this is a series for you. Honestly, I can't recommend David Gemmell enough. I really need to read more David Gemmell, but from all the books I've read in the Drenai Saga so far, these are fast-paced, but he still finds a way to make you care about every single character, and all of his characters feel human. David Gemmell is an author who's often considered the king of heroic fantasy, yet I would still say he's underrated. He might not be the most sophisticated fantasy writer out there, but he is a master storyteller, and I would say that the Drenai Saga, or at least Legend, is required reading. Now, one of the authors that I consistently see being mentioned as the one that got people into reading is Brandon Sanderson. Now, I feel like Sanderson has been getting a lot of hate online recently, and you can say what you want about Sanderson. I'm not the Sanderson police, but I know Wind and Truth didn't live up to those big expectations for a lot of people, myself included. I wish he took a bit more time to fine-tune his character arcs instead of giving us frequent open mic therapy sessions. I actually haven't even finished Wind and Truth yet, but I truly don't think that Sanderson deserves all the negativity that I see online. Though to balance all the negativity, of course, there's a ton of praise as well. Is he the best fantasy writer out there and the second coming of Christ in the fantasy community? No, he's not. Is his writing style and prose as beautiful and detailed as some other big-name fantasy authors? No, it's not. But coming from someone who loves beautiful prose, Sanderson's writing style has never really been a negative thing in my mind. I mean, Sanderson has talked about how he worked hard on his style, in which he prioritizes clarity and understandability over flowery or poetic language. And I think this works great for him and for the stories that he's writing. This style wouldn't work as good for The Name of the Wind or The Book of the New Sun, or even A Song of Ice and Fire, but it works for Sanderson's stories. Prose is the window through which the viewer sees the fantasy world. Now, some authors put a beautiful stained glass window that is art in itself, but Brandon puts a clear piece of square glass because the focus is the world behind it, and he's created some incredible worlds. Ones that I think are perfect for beginners wanting to get hooked on fantasy. I had a hard time deciding on which Brandon Sanderson book I would recommend for beginners because there's a lot of great starting points. I mean, you could start with a standalone like Elantris or Warbreaker. Personally, I think a great standalone to start with is The Emperor's Soul, which is actually a novella, but I feel like that's a perfect standalone to start with. However, the series that I think is just perfect to begin with is the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. I mean, who would have guessed? Right? There's a genius magic system, there's a high-stakes rebellion, a great cast of characters, and plot twists that hit harder than a coin shot to the chest. And I would say that the reading level for Mistborn is somewhere in between young adult and adult, so it's very accessible and easy to get into. Whether you are a young adult or an adult, I feel like anyone can really enjoy this series. Now, Mistborn is set in a world where the Dark Lord has already won. The sky is ash, the sun is red, and society is divided between the brutal nobility and the enslaved Ska. Mistborn tells the story of Vin, a street urchin who discovers that she has a rare and powerful ability tied to ingesting and burning specific metals that give you different powers. Now, she's taken in by a crew of thieves, not to rob a bank, but to overthrow an empire. Kelsier is the leader of the crew, and he's equal parts revolutionary, showman, and deeply scarred survivor. His charisma, his ideals, his contradictions, he's one of those characters who really sticks with you. But really, the whole crew is so much fun. This is kind of like Ocean's 11 meets Middle-earth ruled over by Sauron. And we've got the smooth-talking Soother, we got the lovable Drenai, the scholar, the whole crew is there. And I'm sure if you've heard anything about Mistborn, it's that the magic system here, Sanderson builds it with scientific precision. He makes every magical action feel earned and grounded. The Final Empire, Book 1, it actually surprisingly works really well as a standalone. There's a beginning, middle, and end, so really you could just read this as a standalone and see if you enjoy it, then decide if you want to continue or not, but I really think you should continue. So if you want an accessible, page-turning introduction to fantasy that has one of the best magic systems you're going to read, then you need to read Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. Before getting to the number 1, I have some honorable mentions, and I still think all of these are perfect for beginners to fantasy. So really, they could have made it to the list, but they just didn't quite make it. First of all, we got Kings of the Wild and the sequel, Bloody Rose by Nicholas Eames. These books are so much fun. It mixes like rockstar vibes with fantasy, and it's basically a getting the band back together story with like some old washed up mercenaries. It's as fantastic as it sounds. I would say if you're a fan of like, especially if you're a fan of some video games like Final Fantasy and whatnot, or even just like Dungeons and Dragons, this is perfect. It feels like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. There's actually some like Easter eggs to Final Fantasy as well as some other series. The author is so great at blending in some humor into this gritty action story, and it just works perfectly. I highly recommend checking out Kings of the Wild. Another one is Sufficiently Advanced Magic. I feel like this is a very solid transition novel between young adult and fantasy. It falls right in the middle, so I feel like this is a really great one for beginners to read as well. The Devils is a really gritty heist story. It's got a lot of great humor in there as well. I mean, James Cameron loved reading this book so much that he bought the rights to it so he can make an adaptation. So that should say something. I mean, this is This is a really great book. I still like First Law a bit more, but I think this is a solid novel, and you should definitely check it out. If you want to hear more details, make sure to watch my binge-worthy recommendations video, my top 10 binge-worthy books, because I give a lot more details on the Devils. If you have any interest in manga, then some recommendations for me would definitely be Berserk. Berserk is one of the best fantasy stories ever told, and you definitely should read it as well. It's very dark though. It's not for the faint of heart. Another one that is fantastic, I haven't completely finished it yet though, is Vagabond. I love the spines on these ones, but Vagabond is fantastic as well. And of course, one of my longtime favorites is Full Metal Alchemist. This one is really great. It's got humor in it as well. It's got a really engaging story with a lot of mystery, and I think it's a great place to start with manga if you've never dived into manga before. And I'm always going to recommend just having an open mind and giving manga a chance, even if you're not really into anime, because there's so many good stories that you're missing out on. And of course, I'm gonna recommend One Piece. I'm actually gonna be getting back into making One Piece videos soon. I know it's been way too long, but One Piece is a huge commitment. I think it's great for beginners, but you also, like, it gets better as it goes along, so you kind of have to really make a commitment to read it. And then we have my favorite book in a long time, The Will of the Many by James Islington. And yes, it is Islington, not Islington. The Will of the Many is set in this brutal Roman-inspired empire where power is literally drawn from those below you in a magic system called the Hierarchy of Will. And yeah, it's pretty much just as dystopian as it sounds. The main character is Viz, and he's like a fugitive that's hiding in plain sight because he basically gets forced into joining the most elite academy in the Republic. Everyone just kind of believes he's another orphan that's crawling his way up the ranks, but really he's there for revenge, for sabotage, and maybe, just maybe, a chance at taking down the whole empire from the inside. This is a really great blend of different genres. We got like dark academia, we got that magical school influence, and it's part political thriller, all wrapped up in this high stakes character drama. If you've enjoyed books like Red Rising or The Name of the Wind or Empire of Silence, this is kind of in that same wheelhouse. I think you'll definitely enjoy this one. There's secret identities and conspiracies, there's betrayals, there's ancient mysteries, and a society that's held together by a terrifying power system that drains people of their strength and their future. Viz is a very clever and angry protagonist that we're following. He's haunted by his past, but he's not just like a brooding cliche. Watching him try to navigate this cutthroat world while trying to stay true to his mission because he's fiercely loyal is really, it can be heartbreaking, also very inspiring at times. And despite this book being pretty complex with a lot of like Roman terminology, it's also very accessible. I feel like it's very easy to get into and to follow along, and the pacing is so good in this book. I feel like for beginners, this is the perfect entry point to modern fantasy. It has that page-turning intensity of like a thriller, but then the immersion and magic of a big fantasy saga. I honestly can't recommend this one enough, and the book I am most excited to read is the sequel, The Strength of the Few. This one releases on November 11th. I have an early copy here, which I haven't actually started yet. I'm probably gonna start it next month because I can't wait any longer. And there we have my top 10 beginner fantasy books for adults. Now obviously, I could only choose 10 books for this video, which is much harder than you would think it is. So there's probably lots of books that you would have put in the top 10 that I didn't include here. That doesn't mean I don't like those books. It probably most likely means I just haven't gotten to them yet, or for some reason I just didn't put them on this list. So make sure to tell me all your recommendations in the comments. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and as always, a huge thank you to my patrons and my channel members who make these videos possible. You guys are amazing, and I appreciate the support so much, more than you know. Anyways, I'll see you guys soon.